Hello and welcome to episode 3, diving into the differences between the Wheel of Time TV show and the Wheel of Time book. As a reminder, this book is 815 pages long, so if we don't want to be here for 2 hours, I am not going line by line and page by page, but rather just giving you the significant plot and character differences. Let's dive into episode 3. So this first part I usually talk about character appearances and costume changes and character changes, and really in this episode it's all like, let's just talk about Tom, okay? Thom Merrilin is much older in the book. He is said to have white hair and a long white drooping beard. He is definitely coded very much older. Thom Merrilin also has a very famous cloak that is mentioned many times. That is a cloak made out of a patchwork of very colorful scraps of fabric. It marks him as a gleeman. So they had a nod to that inside his jacket, but definitely not what was in the book. Also, one non-Tom related comment, but the Tuatha'an are less colorfully dressed here than they are in the book. In the book, it is described as garish, and here it just felt like normal colorful. And then character changes. Tom is pretty much a completely different character in the novels. I cannot overstate this. I would not think this is Tom if I did not know and his name was Tom. As a gleeman, he does much more over-the-top performances in the books, like acrobatics and juggling and epic tale retelling, not really like somber performances. Additionally, as we'll talk about later, the way he treats the boys is just so different than why he treats them in the book. He is very protective over them, and it's just like a little bit more of a light-hearted relationship. I have to admit, I really struggle with Tom. We can talk about it later. Let's get into the plot. Okay, so obviously I established in the last video that none of this happens with Nynaeve, so yeah, none of this happens. I mentioned this also in the last episode. This sort of happens. She'd already found them, but then she tracks them again after being separated in Shadar Logoth, but Moiraine isn't injured. In fact, she spends time talking to Nynaeve about how she's like, Nynaeve, you have the one power, and Nynaeve is shook and does not want to admit it. So that it's just like a different dynamic. I do understand. I think they're trying to set up the next relationship steps for Lan and Nynaeve and what that turns into, and I can't fault them for that. I think I actually enjoy it. I think they has really good vibes. It has the vibes the book is trying to give off. So Mat and Rand are with Tom here. They actually get on a boat after being chased by Trollocs, and they actually spend a significant part of what would be this episode on a ship. And they are with a captain called Captain Damon, and he's a recurring character, so I just want to mention him. I think they've probably cut him, which I get it. And Perrin and Egwene, like I said in the last episode, are actually separated right now, and they are separated in a forest. It's like a forested area. Then they come back together, and so it kind of misses this funny scene where Perrin is super worried about getting to Egwene and if she's doing okay, and then when he finds her, she is doing way better at surviving than he is, and it's very funny. I do think this fire scene is a little bit of a nod to that, so I appreciated it. I thought it was funny. I get why they condensed that. We'll say though, Egwene using the one power to light the fire was a bigger deal in the book. It was scary because they're scared of the one power in the book. Again, all this stuff isn't here. Maureen's not injured. I appreciate what they're trying to set up with the Lan Nynaeve scene, so we'll just move on. This specific dream obviously doesn't happen, as Perrin did not have a wife in the books. But the three boys are all still having these sorts of dreams with this fire-eyed man that are sort of real and not real. Again, good to set it up. This happens throughout several books. They aren't ever running from wolves. They're just trying to walk and survive. I think there is they kind of know that there's wolves in the background, but we'll talk about that in a second. This starts with Rand and Mat, what I think is going to end up being a combination of a ton of scenes from the book. So does this specific town exist in the book? No. But it'll be easier to talk about that as this scene progresses. So we meet Thom Merrilin here instead of back in the Two Rivers. Honestly, I really understand this choice. There are so many characters in Wheel of Time that you need to set up, and I think it was good to save Tom for a little bit later. But what I can't understand is, who is this Tom? Because it certainly isn't the Tom I know from the books. I don't get it. Him stealing from Mat and then not giving the money back? Nope. Don't like it. It's not a thing. So at this point, when they find the tracks, actually they would have been found by a character named Elias, who is related to the wolves. I won't go too much further into it. I'm really hoping they didn't cut this character, so I hope we see him later, but they do meet him before they eventually meet the Tuatha'an. I think they're kind of doing an inconsistent job of showing how Mat is changing here. It won't spoil it for those who haven't read, so I won't say why, but yeah. I do think this specific scene, however, is very good, and I really liked it. But yeah, none of this happens in the book. I guess I should mention that, but I think it's a good representative scene of what does happen. Yeah, this is pretty good. I feel like this is pretty good. Okay, so there is never an ailment in a cage here. It actually happens in book 3, and it's very different. The ailment is alive, and it's actually Perrin who finds him and has a thing with him. So I don't know if it was trying to take that from book 3, But yeah, this is very different. I do think they put this ailment here to establish some kind of important foreshadowing that we need. So I don't blame them for that. Yeah, anyway, this doesn't happen, and I'm not sure how I feel about it, honestly. Okay, this is good. I like this good nod to the scenes where Rand feels guilty about flirting with other girls, since he's kind of, but not really, with Egwene, but ultimately stays faithful. I was actually super stressed that they were gonna have him kiss this random girl, and I was like, no, that's not Rand. So I really like how that scene played out. I do think this is a very interesting scene where he's knocking down the door. Do you guys think this is replacing the lightning scene from the original book if you've read them? I think this is replacing the lightning scene, which I think is an interesting choice. It's more subtle, which I think is what the show's going for. But I'm glad that they have at least a nod to it here. I think they're doing it to, create that tension. Okay, so she betrays him. She's a dark friend. She's working for the Dark One. This is really a combination of what happens to Mat and Rand over and over and over and over again. Now, I don't want to speak too soon because this is episode 3 and maybe this will happen in episode 4, but I am predicting that it won't. I think this scene is supposed to stand in for all the times this did happen to Mat and Rand. While they are running, they get betrayed over and over again. Nowhere they stay is safe. Everyone is doing this to them. They meet a million dark friends. They keep running into fades. And it's just a really long portion of the book that I'm not surprised they cut down. I was expecting it. So just as an FYI, this scene represents many different types of scenes like this that happen through, I swear, like over 100 pages of the book. I appreciate it in the book because it's so the exhausting nature. I get why they're probably not going to do it for the show, but I won't go into details just in case they use some of it. So yeah, at the end here, we don't meet Liandrin, I think, until book 2. Don't quote me on that, but I don't really remember her being a thing till book 2. But anyway, either way, this isn't the appearance we normally see with Liandrin, but this is introducing us to Logain, who we don't meet in this way. Again, this scene doesn't exist. We don't meet Logain in a cage until actually Caemlyn, and it is Rand who sees him. So I think they're just kind of introducing him a little early because I think they are going to give him some backstory. So that's an interesting change. It doesn't upset me, just kind of an interesting change. What else I find interesting just to mention at the end here is I'm guessing that we won't lose Tom, just in case I won't talk about what the circumstances are here, but we've just met Tom too late already in the show to make that a significant plot point. I think it would be very difficult and too fast of a turnaround. I don't actually think this is that bad. If you really think about the effect of that in the novels, I don't think we're going to be missing it if we don't have it, because they've already put higher emotional stakes into other areas of the boys' and girls' lives that I think we don't necessarily need it. So I would not be surprised if they cut that out, and I don't think it would bother me too much. I do think this episode gives us a lot of context about maybe why they made relationships much more adult. I was really against it at first because Rand and Egwene and all of these characters are so innocent in the Two Rivers, and that innocence is really important for later character growth. However, I wonder if they wanted to go away from this because it is very reminiscent of The Lord of the Rings. We have the hobbits in the Shire who are very innocent, and then they go and learn more of the world. I wonder if they were trying to distance themselves from that very classic trope. Additionally, as much as I love the idea of Egwene and Rand's relationship in the novels, it does come along as cheesy, and I know I'm not the only one who thinks that. We often talk about how Robert Jordan's relationships in the novels have kind of a hard time getting started. They have such an intense relationship, but really have not had any relationship, and I found myself oddly moved by the scene where Perrin tells Egwene in the show, Rand isn't going to go home because he's going to follow you and he's going to know that you're going to the White Tower. And it made me feel something I didn't feel in the book, because they had established that Rand and Egwene actually have a real relationship. And so surprisingly, I'm very on board for the decision to make that relationship more adult. I think it gives it more weight. I feel more connected to it already, and I hope they don't play it for too much drama, but as it is now, I think it's a very nice thread, and I'm glad they did it, and I'm glad they aged up Egwene for that reason as well. I think it makes all the characters feel more adult, because really they are, I think it's 19 and a half in the book, and they are 20 in the show, and I think that making them actually act like 20-year-olds and not 16-year-olds, how they often act in the book, was probably a great choice for the adult audiences that will be viewing this show. Am I on board about Perrin's wife yet? No. Do I hate it? No. Am I on board? No. My biggest issue here is that later on, I don't think this is a huge spoiler, but Perrin's big thing is about kind of blaming that aspect of himself on the reason he went berserk. Well, that aspect of himself wasn't there yet in this first episode, so that scene of him going berserk doesn't mean as much here. In fact, when they introduced the wife, I immediately knew she was going to die because I read the book, and I was like, well, she can't exist, so she's going to die in the Trolloc attack. I thought it was just to make things more intense, and what I thought was going to happen was that Perrin was going to watch her get killed because of his inaction. I thought that would make sense with Perrin's current personality of the really gentle kind of giant, and it would also make sense with his later struggles between the axe and the hammer. I think they are still going to do that, but just in a very different way than I expected. I'm going to reserve judgment. I'm going to see how this plays out. Overall, Wheel of Time fans, I think I've seen a lot of freaking out on the internet about how terrible it is, and I'm kind of surprised. We have to understand an adaptation can never ever be one for one, and it also has to appeal to general audiences. Now, I was with you guys. I was kind of freaking out after episode 1, but now that I've seen episodes 2 and 3, I actually am very hopeful. I'm going to reserve judgment. I'm excited for a lot of the things they have done. I think they have made some very good character decisions, and so I'm excited for the rest of the season. I'm really enjoying it so far, and I really want to know what you guys think. If you haven't read the books, I'm really interested to hear if you're understanding what's going on and how you like it. If you have read the books and are a huge fan, let me know what changes I've missed and that you wish I had talked about, or how you feel about it. And as always, if you want more Wheel of Time content or content like this, please subscribe. And if you want to see what I'm currently reading or more nerdy rants, you can check me out on Instagram at bookborn.reviews. I'll see you next time. Bye.